The overhead compartments rattled as the turbulence hit again, shaking the plane like a toy in the grip of a careless child. But the real storm wasn't outside. It was unfolding quietly in row 27. Wedged into the narrow seat by the window, a man in a faded hoodie sat hunched forward, shielding the small figure beside him with his body. His daughter, maybe 6 or 7, had her head tucked into his side, clutching a worn-out stuffed bunny so tightly its ears flopped pitifully over her knuckles. Around them, passengers chuckled under their breath. Some exchanged smirks and whispers about his scuffed work boots and threadbare jeans. Others rolled their eyes when he began softly humming to soothe the girl. To them, he looked like a broke, out-of-place single dad, an unwanted passenger in their otherwise orderly flight experience. But 10 minutes later, when the intercom crackled and the flight attendants suddenly stood stiff-backed like soldiers awaiting orders, every mocking grin disappeared. The man they had ridiculed was addressed with a single, unmistakable word. "Sir." Before we go on, drop a comment and let us know where you're tuning in from, and don't forget to follow for more stories like this one. Let's begin. "Daddy, I'm scared," whispered little Madison, her blonde curls messy from sleep and worry. Her voice quivered as the plane shook once more. "I've got you, sweetheart," her father murmured, pressing a kiss to her forehead. His name was Ethan Walker, a 42-year-old man whose eyes carried the weight of sleepless nights, long hours, and quiet sacrifice. He gently tucked the stuffed bunny under her chin and whispered, "Remember what I always say? Be brave. Brave like Bunny." A woman sitting a few rows ahead scoffed. She wore an expensive-looking navy dress and pearls around her neck. She muttered something not so quietly, "This is why I hate flying coach. Full of people who don't belong here." Her husband chuckled under his breath. Probably spent his last dime on this ticket. "Look at those boots. I doubt they've seen polish in a decade." Ethan heard every word. He didn't respond. His calloused fingers dug into the armrest as he fought to stay calm. He wasn't here for their approval. He was here because Madison had begged, pleaded, to finally see the ocean. The turbulence faded, but the tension in the cabin lingered like a bad odor. The whispers didn't stop. A young guy across the aisle even pulled out his phone and started recording Ethan like he was some kind of spectacle. Then, everything changed. The loudspeaker came to life with a pop and a burst of static. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a minor systems issue," said the pilot. "Please remain calm and seated." That was airline code for, "We don't know what the hell is going on yet." Another jolt rocked the plane. The lights flickered. A low, collective gasp echoed through the cabin. The same people who had been laughing seconds ago were now white-knuckling their armrests, suddenly hyper-aware of the sky's unpredictability. Madison whimpered, burying her face deeper into her father's chest. But Ethan didn't flinch. Instead, he sat up straighter. His eyes swept across the cabin, not in panic, but with the controlled intensity of someone trained to assess, not react. In that instant, his entire presence shifted. Gone was the tired dad with fraying cuffs and busted boots. In his place was something else entirely. Something alert, capable, dangerous even. A flight attendant rushed down the aisle, her face pale, hand gripping a radio like a lifeline. Her eyes landed on Ethan, and she froze. Recognition dawned on her face. In a blink, her posture changed. She stood upright, saluted. "Sir," she said, her voice tight but steady, "we may need your instructions." Gasps rippled through the rows. Dozens of heads turned. Mouths dropped open. The same man they had judged and dismissed was now being addressed with military precision. "Sir," someone whispered from a nearby row, stunned. Ethan gently squeezed Madison's hand before nodding to the flight attendant. "Show me," he said. His voice, clear, level, commanding, cut through the cabin like a blade through silence. The engine hum was suddenly the only sound. Phones lowered. Conversations stopped. All eyes followed Ethan as he rose from his seat, leaving behind the man they thought he was. Madison looked up at him, her face full of questions. "Daddy, what's going on?" He brushed a hand through her hair and gave her a soft, steady smile. "Nothing you need to worry about, pumpkin. Just stay brave like we talked about. But his eyes told a different story. They were locked in, sharp, cold, focused. Sir, the attendant said again, this time more formal, the captain has asked you to come forward. He said, if you're on board, protocol applies. She clamped her mouth shut, realizing she had already said too much. The woman in pearls stiffened. Protocol? She echoed. What protocol? Who is he? Her husband squinted at Ethan's back. Military, I think. But, special forces maybe? Ethan didn't respond. He bent down and placed the stuffed bunny on Madison's lap. Hold this for me, sweetheart, he said. She clutched it tightly, nodding. The moment Ethan stepped into the aisle, a subtle but unmistakable shift happened. The flight attendants standing nearby straightened to attention. One quietly whispered, Sir, welcome aboard. There it was again. That word. Sir. As he walked toward the cockpit, passengers craned their necks to get a better look, their smirks long gone, replaced by stunned silence and wide eyes. No one made a sound. Every step Ethan took echoed like a drumbeat through the cabin. One of the attendants reached for the cockpit door. As it opened, Ethan vanished inside. The door clicked shut. And just like that, the man they had mocked for singing to his daughter and wearing cheap clothes had been pulled into the heart of the crisis. Back in row 27, Madison stared straight ahead, her bunny tucked under her chin like a little soldier standing guard. The whispers around her were no longer cruel. They were full of awe. Speculation. Fear. Who the hell was that guy? Someone muttered. I think he just might save our lives, said another. Fear had wiped the smirks clean off their faces. Near the cockpit door, Captain Lewis turned and visibly exhaled in relief when he caught sight of him. Major Walker, he said quietly, with a faint shake of his head. Had no idea you were on this flight. Gasps rippled through the nearby rows. Major! The word echoed like a dropped glass in a quiet room. Ethan clenched his jaw. It had been years since anyone had called him by that rank. What's the situation? He asked. The captain moved quickly into briefing mode. A wiring issue had disabled the secondary navigation system, not critical, not yet, but serious enough to rattle the crew. And if the problem spread? It could be worse than just turbulence. The passengers don't know the full details, Captain Lewis admitted, his voice low. But when the console flickered, some of the crew started to panic. You being here, it changes the equation. You know that. Ethan gave a short nod. He had spent 15 years in the Air Force, 15 years of tight-lipped operations, black flight suits, and classified missions that the average citizen would never know existed. To these passengers, he was just a tired dad in a hoodie. To the flight crew, he was still Major Ethan Walker, the man who once landed a bird in enemy territory during a total systems failure, twice. I'll handle the cabin, he said calmly. But I want updates every 5 minutes. Clear? Yes, sir, the captain replied instantly. When Ethan walked back into the economy cabin, the sound of his boots striking the floor was the only noise in the silence that greeted him. Rows of eyes turned to him, wide with awe or shadowed by guilt. The man in the sleek gray suit who had mocked his clothes earlier suddenly found his shoes very interesting. The young guy with the phone? He shoved it deep into his hoodie pocket like it was burning a hole in there. Ethan stopped in the middle of the aisle and spoke, not loudly but clearly, with a tone that left no room for argument. Ladies and gentlemen, listen up. Every head turned. This flight is under control. The crew is following proper protocol, and I'm here to make sure everyone gets to the ground safely. So, breathe. Hold on to your loved ones. And stop panicking. Fear helps no one. The firmness in his voice didn't need volume. Even the toddler who had been crying a few rows up fell silent, as if soothed by the confidence in his tone. Ethan returned to his seat beside Madison. She immediately gripped his hand. Are we okay, Daddy? She whispered. He nodded and smiled gently, this time with more warmth. We are. But maybe we can do something kind while everyone's still a little shaken up. He tilted his chin toward the opposite side of the aisle. See that little boy over there? Madison followed his gaze. The boy looked about her age. His cheeks were red and damp with tears, his arms tightly clutching a handheld game console as if it might protect him from the sky itself. His mother, visibly anxious, whispered to him, trying and failing to calm him down. Madison nodded slowly. "Why don't you share Brave Bunny with him for a bit?" Ethan suggested. "You know how much it helped you. Maybe it'll help him too." Her lips pressed into a line. Brave Bunny was her everything. Her most precious friend. Her courage. But then she looked at the boy again. His shoulders shook with every sniffle. After a long breath, she quietly unbuckled, stood up, and walked across the aisle. Carefully, she placed Brave Bunny on the boy's lap. The crying stopped almost immediately. The boy stared at her with wide, wet eyes and then hugged the plush toy to his chest. His mother mouthed, "Thank you," her eyes shimmering. That one act of kindness swept across the cabin like a ripple in a still pond. People who had just minutes earlier sneered or judged were now silent, some with shameful expressions, others shifting uncomfortably in their seats. They began to realize just how cruel their assumptions had been. And Ethan's quiet presence turned their fear into something else entirely. Respect. The young guy with the phone finally spoke, clearing his throat. "I'm sorry, sir," he said, eyes down. "For earlier." Ethan nodded once. No anger. No pride. Just calm clarity. There were more important things to focus on than bruised egos. Minutes passed slowly. The aircraft rocked again, but this time, no one screamed. They all instinctively looked toward Ethan, and seeing him steady, unfazed, they followed his lead. Another flight attendant approached and knelt beside him. "Sir," she said softly, "the captain reports the system stabilized. He's grateful for your presence." Ethan gave her a nod. He wasn't in it for the gratitude. He was here for his daughter. But when he glanced down, he realized something. Madison wasn't just safe. She was smiling. She watched the little boy still holding Brave Bunny, and for the first time since takeoff, her fear had vanished. Passengers began to murmur apologies. Some offered snacks or water, awkwardly trying to make amends. Ethan declined everything with a quiet shake of his head. His silence was louder than any words. Then the woman in pearls, the one who had criticized him so sharply earlier, spoke up, her voice trembling. "I judged you," she admitted. "I thought you didn't belong here. I was wrong." Ethan turned his head and looked at her, his expression calm and resolute. "We all belong here," he said. "Just remember that." His words struck deeper than any lecture. By the time the captain's voice came over the intercom again to announce their descent, the cabin's energy had shifted completely. The fear was gone. The tension had faded. No one was laughing, but in its place was something far better: dignity, humility. And all of it centered around one man, sitting quietly with his daughter in row 27. The man they had laughed at. The one they had dismissed without a second thought. The dad in beat-up boots and a threadbare hoodie. Now, every single passenger on that aircraft looked at him differently. Because they finally understood the truth. He wasn't just Ethan Walker, the quiet man in row 27. He was Major Walker. And in just one flight, he had shown them what real strength and real kindness look like. The seatbelt sign dinged overhead, and the captain's voice returned over the intercom. This time, it was calm, steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, our systems have fully stabilized, and we're preparing for descent. Please remain seated as we begin our approach. And I'd like to take a moment to thank a very special passenger." "Thank you, sir." A hum rippled through the cabin. Dozens of heads turned in unison toward Ethan. Whispers followed, some full of reverence, others stunned disbelief. "Why did he thank you, Daddy?" Madison asked, tugging gently at his sleeve. Ethan looked down at her, a soft smile breaking across his face. "Because sometimes, doing what's right is more important than what people think of you. Even if no one notices at first, the truth always comes out." Her eyes sparkled with pride. "You're my hero," she whispered. Those 3 words hit harder than any salute or medal. He swallowed hard and brushed her hair back from her eyes. "And you're mine." The plane tilted slightly as it descended, breaking through a layer of golden clouds. The setting sun lit the wings with a fiery glow. But inside the cabin, A quiet stillness had taken over. No more laughter at Ethan's worn boots. No more whispered judgments about the man who didn't belong. Instead, there was only silence and recognition. The young man who had tried to record him earlier now sat with his head bowed in shame. The woman in pearls fidgeted with her necklace, unable to look in his direction. Even the student who had mocked Madison's stuffed bunny leaned forward and whispered something gentle to the little boy still holding the toy tightly in his arms. And then it happened. The plane touched down with a rumble, wheels skimming the runway with a soft jolt. But before the usual frenzy of unbuckling and scrambling for overhead bags could begin, the flight attendants unfastened their belts. They didn't wait. One by one, they walked down the aisle, ignoring protocol, ignoring routine, until they reached row 27. They didn't just glance at Ethan. They stood tall, shoulders back, heels together. One by one, they nodded. "Thank you, sir." The words echoed softly through the hushed cabin. A few passengers gasped. Some clapped, but the applause faded quickly into something deeper, something heavier. Respect. Ethan didn't stand. He didn't bow or wave. He simply dipped his head in acknowledgement and turned back to Madison, pulling her in closer. Then the captain's voice returned one final time. "For those who are curious, Major Walker served our country for over 15 years. Many of the protocols we follow on commercial flights today were shaped by men like him. His presence on this flight wasn't a coincidence. It was providence." The cabin sat frozen. Not in fear this time, but in reverence. Major Walker. The truth had been spoken. Madison blinked, trying to take it all in. "So, you used to fly planes too?" she asked softly. Ethan gave a small chuckle. "Something like that, sweetheart." When the plane finally rolled to a stop at the gate, there was no rush for the aisle. No frantic reaching for carry-ons. Passengers sat still, casting quiet, almost hesitant glances toward the man and the little girl beside him. It wasn't fear that kept them in their seats now. It was awe. As they began to disembark, some stopped. The man in the expensive suit, the one who had been the first to mock Ethan, paused by their row, clearing his throat. "I owe you an apology," he said, voice subdued. "I judged you. And I was wrong. Thank you." Ethan met his gaze without bitterness. "Be kinder to the next guy who looks like me," he said gently. "That'll mean more than an apology." The man nodded, his cheeks flushed, and moved on. The woman in pearls came next. She spoke in a hushed voice, far removed from the haughty tone she'd used earlier. "Your daughter, she's lucky to have you," she said. "I wish I had seen it sooner." Ethan offered a polite nod but said nothing. He didn't need their validation. Madison's smile was all he needed. At the exit door, the crew stood once more, this time not as attendants, but as silent honor guards. As Ethan stepped through, they saluted one last time. He leaned down toward Madison and whispered, "See? Brave Bunny didn't just help you today." She giggled, the gap from her missing front tooth giving her grin an extra dose of bravery. They stepped into the terminal, just a father and his daughter again. To most people there, they were nobody special. But to everyone on that flight, they would never be just anybody again. And as they walked away from Gate 14, Ethan carried a quiet truth with him, one that needed no spotlight, no applause. Kindness and strength don't shout. They show up when they're needed most. They speak when others stay silent. They lead even when no one is watching. That day, in the narrow aisle of a trembling plane, Ethan Walker reminded everyone on board what real leadership looks like. But to Madison, he was never Major Walker. He was just Dad. Hit like, share your reaction in the comments, and subscribe if the story hit you harder than expected.